Have you ever wondered how long it takes to bottom feed? Well, in this video, we're going to get into it. You're here with Mark Boutwell and Dave Hanson on Perfect Gardens TV. If you haven't checked out our monthly membership, I highly recommend to do so. For only $2.99, you get access to over 1,570 photos, 162 videos, 10 files, 15 audio files, 562 shared links, and 86 members willing and ready to assist you through your growing practice. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and remember to have a great grow. Make sure to hit the join button on the bottom of every video. Oh, so often in my VIP membership, I'm always encouraging guys to do a bottom feed. And why is that? It's so that we build their awareness of how long it actually takes for water to break surface tension and absorb into the water. And I was talking to Dave a little bit about it this morning, and he started rattling off all kinds of things. And I was like, you know what, Dave, why don't you jump on the call with me today and share your insight around this too? So please jump in and tell me what we were talking about a little earlier.
I am good at rambling on a lot of stuff, but basically, you know, in my practices and my observations as a whole, so not just with our medical plants, but with house plants, gardening and stuff like that, I noticed that there's different absorption rates depending on your media. And while most will say, well, that's pretty obvious, we tend to start mixing and blending or buying pre-amended soils that have a variations of cocoa, peat moss, compost, worm castings. And really, when you start putting everything together, you have to look at it as the sum of the whole, and everything that makes up the full components of that soil or that media, everything in it takes different times to absorb the moisture to be what I consider fully saturated. If you take it for an example, like pure peat moss, and I was talking to you about how I like pure peat moss when I'm propagating and starting roots on my house plants. So things like spider plants, very easy plants, you know, you can put in water and they root. But I like the pure peat moss because I kind of keep it in the element that it was found in and harvested in, which is a very, very moist environment, fully saturated environment. But when we start getting into these blended products, you know, 10% peat moss, 10% cocoa, whatever it may be, we have to take into consideration the amount of time that it absorbs that. Well, so often I see people where, you know, the top, especially with fabric pots, if you water too fast, it comes out the side, you know, depending on what the product is, it could shrink and come out the bottom, and you could be like, oh, it's fully saturated. But if you put that same pot that you thought was fully saturated in nice, you know, a plant pan, the saucer, so to speak, you'll see that it takes some time. So I have 5 plants and I just bottom watered yesterday. And for the 5 plants, I'd say as a whole, it took just about an hour in total for full absorption. And what I'm looking at is eventually that the water, after about a half an hour to 45 minutes, is still sitting there at a certain level. And so often, if you come back 15, 20 minutes later, you'll see, wait, where did the water go? Well, it absorbed in, it's wicking up. So if you look at your components and you see that you have pieces of bark, pieces of hay, pieces of sticks, you know, even stuff like kelp meal. Kelp meal is something that needs to be rehydrated. It's going to take a percentage of that water and absorb back into the media. You find that not everything is being absorbed as the same. And if you have the ability to take the time, it's extremely important. You're going to have a more even distribution of water through that whole mass, causing just a beautiful domino effect. So the ability for the plant to break down, to move nutrients into the root zones and to have a better ability to absorb that. Overall, you're going to have that with more consistent saturation of that soil. You're not thinking it's fully saturated and it's not, you know, and some of these medias, when they dry out, you know, life happens, a family happens, whatever in your life that happens, and you come back and you water it and it's severely dried back, just note that it's potentially going to take a long, long time to fully be absorbed, especially the higher peat moss content, or even like me with the compost and stuff, the sticks, the bark, the overall matter, you know, that takes a lot longer to absorb it. But when I go and I kind of dig down and I pull out a piece of bark, and even though the top looks bone dry, the bark is bendable because it still has the moisture content that's withheld in that. So that's going to help overall how much you're going to have to water, right? So if you have a good even distribution of water, then drybacks and stuff like that are going to kind of decrease. So the amount of time that you have to water kind of decreases with that. Now your environment also is going to play a big role. because if it's extremely dry, then you have to take in consideration what's the percentage of moisture that's being evaporated, what percentage is being used by the plant, what's going back into the atmosphere, what's being used by the plant. And with fabric pots, they're great, but I think too often at times too people see more severe drybacks or on the sides and stuff like that. But if you're bottom watering, then that pot as well is absorbing that moisture, so you have more potential moisture to kind of dissipate in that atmosphere, but more of the bulk is staying in the soil.
100%. There's you guys are watching the videos right now. That's why I put our video in an overlay, just to give you a little commentary as you're watching this process, right? And in these videos, what you're seeing right here is how long it takes. And I asked one of our growers to bottom feed once again to build his awareness. He had a 5-gallon and a 3-gallon pot, and he comes back to me, shots the video, comes back to me, and just this video, you're seeing it was a 10 to 15 minute video. I'm not speeding it up and I'm not delaying it because I want you to see how long it takes. With in addition to this, each video I actually had to splice many videos together because he ended up having to wait about 5 minutes in between each watering. So technically this was these 3 and 5 gallon pots was a 20 to 25 minute process. You're also going to see how long it takes when leaves are completely drooped over. You're going to see how long, because I have this other video showing you how long it takes for the water to actually fill up all the capillaries, and you can see the leaves at different levels start to like come back up, and then the water goes up and brings up all the other leaves and so on. So at this point, you have to really just take into consideration that if you're already having a dry back period in your soil system, that soil is already most likely robbing water from your plant. So you kind of got to think of this osmotic effect. There's constantly, on one of our other videos, we talked about how the soil releases stuff back into the soil system. It's constantly going back and forth, guys. So anyways, Dave, if you go ahead, if you want to contribute anything else. The last big factor that naturally comes when we talk about watering from the bottom up is when people say, well, what about top dressing? Well, when you're top dressing, of course, we got to water in from the top, right? We have to start pulling those nutrients in, and maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 different times. But you can also do a combination where you add X amount to the top and then do your bottom watering secondly, and to get that even distribution. But don't go past what you have to do to get those nutrients pulled into it. So, depending on if you're doing a photo period or an auto, how many times you're top dressing, maybe it's only once or twice, or maybe just once during that grow. Absolutely. You got to water in from the top. I still put my teas in from the top. I think there's more benefits. Just my theory is I think that the fabric's going to rob something, but it might not. But I like to put my teas and stuff from the top. But if you've never bottom watered and you have severe drybacks, I highly recommend just to do it. And like Mark is saying, observe how long it takes. Just add in X amount of water, walk away, come back, set a timer, whatever you got to do, come back 20 minutes. If the water's gone, add some more, come back 15 minutes later. If it's gone, add some more until you see that water sitting. Then you can hold up your pot. And most of these soils, it's so hard to oversaturate because the contents, it's part cocoa, part peat moss, part perlite, worm castings. It's going to drain and aerate and create further oxidation and evenness of that moisture in the pot. But if you've never observed it, you just have to do it, because it's going to open your eyes into how long it takes for the mass as a whole. And the more dry amendments and different things you have, kelp meal, bone meal, whatever it may be, all these things have different absorption rates. You can't platform them that they're all going to absorb at the same amount of time, especially bigger pieces, like I said, of bark and sticks. That's going to take some time. But if you fully saturate them, it's going to create longevity in the evenness of the distribution of water in the mass as a whole, whether you're in the 3-gallon, a 5-gallon, a 10-gallon. It's just the time frame shifts just slightly how much more you're going to have to water, or the frequency that you're going to have to water. And that's just a different mindset from a 5 to a 10, and then getting familiarized with that, right? And seeing that, observing that, recording that, and seeing, most importantly, the results, right? So and all this stuff in there, and we think, well, the plant has to be hungry. And when you have things fully saturated properly, the plant has access to it. The microbes have access to it. The roots have access to it. And overall, the health of the plant is going to start to level out, in my opinion, a lot more efficiently. I love it. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Only on Perfect Gardens TV. Have a great grow, everyone. The tiny amounts used in pesticide products are not expected to substantially increase the amount of these esters in the environment. So what they're saying here specifically is what the amount of esters that they use in these pesticides are not going to throw everything out of balance when you use it on a commercial level.